The underlying reality that they didn't really want it, that they thought they should raise children this way, that I never really wanted us.
By 1950, when Shirley was 16, she was dancing professionally in local theater productions. She made just $25 a week. Her father's drinking got worse. He would come home angry and yell at the family. Shirley escaped into dance. On June 15, 1950, she graduated from Washington Lee High School in Arlington. 3 days later, she was on a bus to New York City with $200 in her pocket. Her mother cried at the station. Her father didn't even say goodbye. She arrived in Manhattan on June 20th and moved into a tiny apartment in Hell's Kitchen. The rent was $40 a month. She shared it with 3 other dancers. They slept in bunk beds and ate rice most nights. In September 1950, Shirley got her first real break. She was cast in the chorus of a Broadway show called Oklahoma.
It's absolutely extraordinary gorgeous. It's the backyard of UFOs.
She was just 16, lying about her age to get the job. The pay was $75 a week, which felt like a fortune. But the work was brutal. 8 shows a week, constant rehearsals. If she made one mistake, she could be fired. On November 3, 1950, during a matinee performance, another dancer twisted her ankle. Shirley had to fill in with only 15 minutes' notice. She nailed it. The director noticed her. By December, she was getting better roles. But success came with a price. Other dancers were jealous. They spread rumors that she slept with the choreographer. It wasn't true, but the gossip hurt. In 1952, something happened that would change everything. Shirley was cast as an understudy in a new Broadway show called The Pajama Game. The lead actress was Carol Haney. On May 12, 1954, Haney broke her ankle during a performance. Shirley went on in her place that night. Sitting in the audience was legendary Hollywood producer Hal Wallace. He was so impressed that he offered Shirley a movie contract on the spot. The contract was worth $20,000 for 5 years. She signed it on May 15, 1954.
And told me I have too much expression.
3 days later, she was on a plane to Los Angeles. She was 20 years old and terrified. She had never been on a plane before. Her first film was The Trouble with Harry, directed by Alfred Hitchcock. It came out on October 3, 1955. Hitchcock was a nightmare to work with. He criticized her acting in front of the entire crew. On July 22, 1955, during filming, he made her do 37 takes of one scene. She started crying. He called her unprofessional and threatened to fire her. She earned just $5,000 for the whole film, but critics loved her performance. Suddenly, everyone in Hollywood wanted to work with her. Before all this, back on September 17, 1954, Shirley married Steve Parker. He was a businessman and aspiring producer. They met in New York when she was just 19. The wedding was small with only 30 guests. It cost $300. They honeymooned in Atlantic City for 3 days. By October, they were living in a small apartment in Hollywood. The rent was $85 a month. But Parker had big dreams. He wanted to produce films in Japan. In 1956, just 2 years after they married, he moved to Tokyo.
I understand that's the picture that everyone is more freaked out about than any other. Long before I started writing metaphysical things.
Shirley stayed in Los Angeles to pursue her career. They barely saw each other, maybe once or twice a year. It was a strange marriage from the start. On September 1st, 1956, their daughter Sachi was born. Parker wasn't even there. He was in Japan closing a business deal. Shirley raised Sachi mostly alone while juggling her career. In 1958, Shirley got her first Oscar nomination for Some Came Running. She played a vulnerable, broken woman. The film came out on December 18, 1958, and made $4 million. Her co-stars were Frank Sinatra and Dean Martin. Behind the scenes, Sinatra was drinking heavily. On November 3, 1958, during filming in Indiana, he showed up drunk and couldn't remember his lines. Director Vincente Minnelli shut down production for the day. It cost the studio $15,000. Shirley was frustrated. She was giving her best performance, but Sinatra's behavior was making everything harder. Despite the chaos, she earned $25,000 for the role. That was 5 times what she made on her first film. The Oscar ceremony was on April 6, 1959. Shirley wore a $400 gown that she bought herself. She was up against Elizabeth Taylor and Susan Hayward. When Susan Hayward's name was called, Shirley smiled. But inside she was crushed. She went home that night and cried. Her husband, Steve, called from Japan to console her, but it didn't help. She felt like a failure.
And it's all right as long as I can remember my lines and be, with it.
Over the next few years, she would be nominated 4 more times without winning. Each loss hurt worse than the last. In 1960, Shirley starred in The Apartment with Jack Lemmon. The film came out on June 15th and became a massive hit, making $25 million. Billy Wilder directed it, and he was tough but fair. Shirley earned $50,000, her biggest paycheck yet. The film won Best Picture at the Oscars on April 17, 1961, but Shirley lost Best Actress again, this time to Elizabeth Taylor. She was starting to think she would never win. The night of the ceremony, she got drunk at the after-party. She told a reporter that the Academy was rigged. The quote made headlines. Her agent told her to apologize, but she refused. By 1963, Shirley's marriage was falling apart. Steve Parker was still living in Japan. He would visit maybe twice a year for a few weeks. There were rumors he had a mistress in Tokyo. Shirley didn't care anymore. She started having her own affairs.
Head of the studio called and said, "You're ruining your career and it's only 15 minutes old. Do something."
On March 10, 1963, she met a politician named Olof Palme at a party in Stockholm. They had a brief romance that lasted 3 months. The Swedish press found out and wrote stories about it. Back in Hollywood, the tabloids picked it up. On June 5, 1963, Confidential magazine published a story titled Shirley's Swedish Scandal. Her publicist tried to bury it, but the damage was done. Steve Parker called from Japan, furious. They had a screaming match over the phone. He threatened divorce. She told him to go ahead. He never did. In 1968, Shirley got involved in politics. She campaigned for Robert Kennedy during his presidential run. On June 5, 1968, she was at the Ambassador Hotel in Los Angeles when Kennedy was assassinated. She was standing just 30 feet away when the shots rang out. She saw him fall. The image haunted her for years. She threw herself into activism after that, campaigning for George McGovern in 1972 and speaking out against the Vietnam War.
That there's a web of connection between us all. And basically we're saying that...
But Hollywood didn't like actors who got political. She lost 3 major roles in 1969 because producers thought she was too controversial. One role would have paid $100,000. She was blacklisted without anyone officially saying so. During this time, Shirley became obsessed with spirituality and reincarnation. In 1970, she traveled to Peru to meet a spiritual guru. She spent 2 weeks in the mountains, meditating and fasting. She claimed she had visions of her past lives. When she came back to Hollywood, she wouldn't stop talking about it. Directors thought she had lost her mind. On September 22, 1970, she appeared on The Tonight Show with Johnny Carson and talked about being a reincarnated princess. The audience laughed. Carson made jokes. She didn't care. She was searching for something deeper than fame. In 1975, Shirley published her first book, Don't Fall Off the Mountain. It was about her spiritual journey and her unconventional marriage. It became a bestseller, selling over 500,000 copies. She made $200,000 from the book deal. But the book exposed intimate details about her life. Steve Parker was humiliated. He threatened to sue her for invasion of privacy. They settled out of court. She agreed to pay him $50,000. Their marriage was basically over, but they never officially divorced. They just lived separate lives on opposite sides of the world.
I'm half Canadian, half Virginian. I say out. So I said, "Why, you sit there," and he rushes off to catch the...
Throughout the 1970s, Shirley's career slowed down. She was still getting roles, but nothing major. She was in her 40s, and Hollywood had moved on to younger actresses. In 1977, she starred in The Turning Point with Anne Bancroft. The film came out on November 14th and made $43 million. Both Shirley and Anne were nominated for Best Actress at the Oscars on April 3rd, 1978. It was Shirley's 5th nomination. She lost again, this time to Diane Keaton for Annie Hall. She was starting to accept that she might never win an Oscar. At the ceremony, when Diane Keaton's name was called, Shirley clapped politely. But later at the after-party, she told a friend it felt like a curse. By 1980, Shirley was 46 and worried her career was over. She hadn't had a major role in 3 years. Her agent told her there just weren't good parts for women her age.
I was going to talk pretty much like a Texan. I had the whole thing down. I had the wardrobe done.
On July 15, 1980, she got a call about a new film called Terms of Endearment. It was based on a novel by Larry McMurtry. The role was Aurora Greenway, a difficult, controlling mother. The script was brilliant. Shirley knew this could be her last chance at an Oscar. She agreed to do it immediately. The film was set to start shooting in early 1983. But there was a problem. The other lead role, Aurora's daughter Emma, was going to be played by Deborah Winger. Winger was 27 years old and one of the hottest actresses in Hollywood. She had just been nominated for An Officer and a Gentleman in 1982. She was young, talented, and extremely difficult to work with. From the very beginning, Shirley and Deborah didn't get along. Their first meeting was on January 10, 1983, at a script reading in Los Angeles. Deborah showed up 45 minutes late. She didn't apologize. Shirley was furious but kept quiet. After the reading, they were supposed to have lunch together to bond. Deborah canceled at the last minute. Filming began on February 7, 1983, in Houston, Texas. Director James L. Brooks was nervous. He could already feel the tension between his two stars. On the very first day, they had a scene together in Aurora's living room. It required them to hug. When they hugged, Shirley whispered something under her breath. Deborah heard it and pulled away. "What did you say?" she snapped. Shirley smiled sweetly. "Nothing, dear." The crew felt the ice between them. Brooks called cut and took a break. He pulled both actresses aside separately. He begged them to get along. They both promised to be professional, but it was a lie. Over the next few weeks, things got worse. Deborah started showing up late to set, sometimes an hour late.
I'm good. I'm very good. I'm happy. Love my life. Looking at all the otherness much more seriously.
On February 22nd, she was 2 hours late and offered no explanation. Shirley was always on time. She saw Deborah's behavior as disrespectful. On March the 1st, during a particularly emotional scene, Deborah broke down crying, but Shirley thought she was faking it for attention. After the take, Shirley said loud enough for others to hear, "Well, that was quite a performance." Deborah shot her a look of pure hatred. The real explosion happened on March 15, 1983. They were filming a scene where Aurora and Emma have a major argument. It was supposed to be emotional and raw, but the real emotions were between Shirley and Deborah. During the scene, Deborah started improvising lines that weren't in the script. She called Aurora a selfish, dried-up old woman. It was directed at the character, but everyone knew it was really about Shirley. When Brooks called cut, Shirley stormed over to Deborah. "How dare you?" she said. Deborah stood up face to face with her. "How dare I? You've been condescending to me since day one." The argument escalated. The crew backed away. Brooks tried to intervene, but both women were screaming. Shirley accused Deborah of being unprofessional and ungrateful.
We're doing the movie really for nothing. You know how independent filmmaking is now.
Right.
It's a
Deborah accused Shirley of being jealous and bitter. Then Shirley said something that crossed a line. She mentioned Deborah's recent breakup with actor Timothy Hutton. "Maybe if you spent less time crying over men and more time learning your craft, you'd be worth something." That's when it happened. Deborah Winger, in full view of the cast and crew, lifted up her skirt, turned around, and farted directly in Shirley MacLaine's direction. The room went silent. No one could believe what they just saw. Shirley's face went white, then red with rage. "You disgusting child," she screamed. Deborah laughed. "At least I'm not a has-been pretending to be spiritual." She walked off the set. Filming shut down for the rest of the day.
A dog nanny, food lady for the dogs because I've been working so much. And you can't leave them alone.
Brooks was devastated. The film was already over budget. They couldn't afford delays. That night, he called both actresses separately. He threatened to replace them. Shirley said if Deborah wasn't fired, she would quit. Deborah said the same thing about Shirley. Brooks was stuck. He needed both of them. The studio needed both of them. On March 16th, he held a meeting with both women and the producers. He laid down the law. They didn't have to like each other, but they had to finish the film. If either of them caused another scene, they would be sued for breach of contract. The potential lawsuit was worth $5 million each. They both agreed to behave, but the damage was done. For the rest of filming, Shirley and Deborah barely spoke. They only talked to each other during scenes. Between takes, they stayed in separate trailers. On March 28th, they had to film a deathbed scene. It was supposed to be the most emotional moment in the film.
And all the kind of ancient history coincides with what Socrates and Plato taught.
Right.
That
Emma is dying of cancer, and Aurora holds her hand. In real life, Shirley couldn't stand to touch Deborah. But when the cameras rolled, something shifted. Both actresses tapped into real emotion. Shirley later said she was thinking about her own mortality. Deborah said she was thinking about her real mother. The scene was heartbreaking. The entire crew was in tears. Even Shirley and Deborah were crying for real. For one brief moment, they weren't enemies. They were just two actresses doing their job. Brooks knew he had something special. Filming wrapped on May 20th, 1983. There was no wrap party. Shirley left Houston immediately. Deborah stayed behind for reshoots. They didn't say goodbye to each other. Post-production took months. The film was scheduled for release on November 23rd, 1983. As the release date approached, both actresses had to do press junkets. The studio begged them to appear together. They both refused. So the studio scheduled separate interviews. When reporters asked Shirley about working with Deborah, she gave diplomatic answers. "Deborah is very talented," she would say with a tight smile. When reporters asked Deborah about Shirley, she was less kind. In one interview on November 10th, she said, "Shirley and I had different approaches to acting." In another, she said, "Some people in Hollywood are more interested in fame than the work." Everyone knew who she meant. Terms of Endearment opened on November 23rd, 1983. It was an instant hit. Critics loved it. Audiences loved it. It made $108 million on a $10 million budget. Both Shirley and Deborah received rave reviews. On February 7th, 1984, both were nominated for Best Actress at the Academy Awards. It was awkward. They were competing against each other for the same film. The press ate it up. Reporters tried to pit them against each other.
I really miss them.
Right.
I miss their spontaneity. I miss their...
On March 15th, just weeks before the ceremony, Shirley gave an interview to People magazine. She said, "I hope the Best Actress wins." When asked if she thought she would win, she said, "After 5 nominations, I've learned not to hope too hard." The Academy Awards ceremony was on April 9th, 1984. Shirley wore a custom-made gown that cost $2,000. Deborah wore a simpler dress. They sat on opposite sides of the theater. When the Best Actress category was announced, both women's faces appeared on the screen. The other nominees were Meryl Streep, Julie Walters, and Jane Alexander. Jack Nicholson opened the envelope. "And the winner is Shirley MacLaine." The room erupted in applause. Shirley stood up, shocked. After 25 years and 5 nominations, she had finally won. She walked to the stage in a daze. In her acceptance speech, she thanked James L. Brooks, the cast, and her daughter. She did not thank Deborah Winger. Backstage, reporters asked Shirley how she felt. She was crying. "I can't believe it," she kept saying. When asked about Deborah, she said, "Deborah gave a wonderful performance. It was the most generous thing she had said about her in over a year." Meanwhile, Deborah was at the after party, trying to hide her disappointment. She congratulated Shirley briefly, but there was no warmth between them. The film went on to win Best Picture and Best Director. It won 5 Oscars total. But the legacy of the film would always be tied to the feud.
It's a dark comedy. It's a sociological comment on how the people in this particular part of Texas don't want to hear.
In the years that followed, both women spoke about their time on Terms of Endearment. In 1988, Shirley published another memoir called It's All in the Playing. In it, she wrote about the difficulties of making the film. She said, "Working with Deborah was one of the most challenging experiences of my career." She didn't mention the farting incident specifically, but she hinted at unprofessional behavior on set. The book sold 300,000 copies. Deborah Winger, on the other hand, was more blunt. In a 1995 interview with Barbara Walters, she was asked about Shirley. Deborah said, "Shirley and I will never be friends. We're too different. She's into all that spiritual stuff. I'm into the work." When Walters pressed her about the rumors of a physical altercation, Deborah laughed. "Let's just say we had creative differences." She wouldn't confirm or deny the farting story, but she didn't have to. By then, it had become Hollywood legend. The incident became infamous. Crew members who worked on the film leaked details to tabloids over the years. On October 12, 1992, the National Enquirer published a story titled, "The Fart Heard Round Hollywood." It included quotes from anonymous crew members who witnessed the event. One crew member said, "It was the most shocking thing I've ever seen on a film set. Deborah just lifted her dress and let it rip. Shirley looked like she was going to faint." The story reignited interest in the feud. In 1996, Entertainment Weekly ranked it as one of the top 10 celebrity feuds of all time. Shirley, who was promoting a new film at the time, was asked about it. She sighed and said, "That was a long time ago. I've moved on." But she hadn't really. In private conversations with friends, she still referred to Deborah as that brat.
We deferred our salaries. We got paid something and then deferred the rest so that the bond company would give us an okay to begin.
Over the next 2 decades, Shirley's career continued. She wrote more books about spirituality and reincarnation. She appeared in films like Steel Magnolias in 1989, Postcards from the Edge in 1990, and Guarding Tess in 1994. She became known as much for her eccentric beliefs as for her acting. She claimed she had lived multiple past lives, including as a court jester in Louis XV's court and a prostitute in ancient Egypt. Critics mocked her, but she didn't care. She was financially secure, having made over $10 million from book deals and film residuals. She bought a ranch in New Mexico where she spent most of her time meditating and writing. Deborah Winger, meanwhile, took a break from Hollywood in the mid-1990s. She was tired of the industry and the constant scrutiny. She moved to New York and focused on raising her family. She returned to acting in the 2000s with roles in films like Rachel Getting Married in 2008, which earned her another Oscar nomination. She lost to Kate Winslet. In interviews, she still refused to talk warmly about Shirley. When asked in 2009 if she would ever work with Shirley again, Deborah said flatly, no. In 2019, journalist Maureen Dowd interviewed Shirley for a profile in the New York Times. The interview, published on April 7th, touched on many aspects of Shirley's life. Near the end, Dowd asked about Deborah Winger. Shirley, now 85 years old, paused. "Deborah is a very talented actress," she said carefully, "but we were never meant to be friends. Sometimes 2 strong personalities just clash."
They truly challenged things to go wrong,
Right.
to see how they would react to it.
Right.
When Dowd asked if there was any chance of reconciliation, Shirley shook her head. "I don't hold grudges, but I also don't forget. It was the closest thing to closure the public would get." Then in 2023, something unexpected happened. James L. Brooks was promoting a 40th anniversary screening of Terms of Endearment at the Academy Museum in Los Angeles. The event was scheduled for November 15th. He invited both Shirley and Deborah to attend. Deborah declined immediately. Shirley agreed to go. At the screening, during the Q&A session, Brooks was asked about the famous feud. He laughed uncomfortably. "Look, making that film was incredibly difficult. Both women are perfectionists. They approach their roles differently. There was tension, yes, but they also created something beautiful together." The audience applauded, but everyone wanted more details. After the event, a reporter from Variety cornered Shirley in the lobby. "Do you have any regrets about how things went with Deborah?" the reporter asked. Shirley thought for a moment.
And he died in front of my dancing school in Washington, D.C.
"I regret that we couldn't find a way to work together peacefully, but I don't regret the film. That film changed my life." When asked if she would ever reach out to Deborah, Shirley said, "At my age, I've learned that some relationships are meant to stay in the past." But the story didn't end there. In August 2025, Shirley gave a rare interview to Vanity Fair. She was 91 years old and promoting her latest memoir. The interviewer, clearly doing research, brought up Terms of Endearment again. This time, Shirley's guard was down. Maybe it was her age. Maybe she was tired of pretending. She finally told the truth. "Deborah Winger was one of the most unprofessional people I've ever worked with," she said. "She was late. She was rude. And yes, the farting incident happened. It was disgusting and childish. I wanted her fired, but the studio wouldn't allow it. I had to grit my teeth and get through it." The interviewer pressed further. "Did you ever try to talk to her about it?" Shirley laughed bitterly. "Talk to her? She didn't want to talk. She wanted to prove she was tougher than me. She wanted to show everyone that the young star could overpower the veteran. Well, she didn't. I won the Oscar. The film was a success. And she has to live with the fact that she behaved like a child."
I'm not sure why that happens. I mean, that's no more outrageous than to cross yourself before you go in.
The Vanity Fair article, published on August 20th, 2025, exploded. It was titled Shirley MacLaine Breaks Her Silence, The Truth About Deborah Winger. Within hours, it was trending on social media. People took sides. Some supported Shirley, calling Deborah unprofessional. Others defended Deborah, saying Shirley was bitter and condescending. Deborah Winger, now 70 years old, was asked for comment by multiple outlets. She declined. Her publicist released a brief statement. Ms. Winger has no interest in rehashing events from 40 years ago. She wishes Ms. MacLaine well. But the damage was done. The feud, which had simmered quietly for decades, was back in the spotlight. Film critics and historians weighed in. Some said it was a clash of two brilliant but incompatible actresses. Others said it was emblematic of how Hollywood pits women against each other. On September 5th, 2025, a podcast called Hollywood Feuds dedicated an entire episode to Shirley and Deborah. They interviewed crew members from Terms of Endearment, though most requested anonymity. One former assistant director said, "It was a toxic set. Both women brought out the worst in each other. Shirley could be cold and condescending. Deborah could be aggressive and disrespectful. Neither was innocent." By September 2025, Shirley seemed to regret opening up so publicly.
The underlying reality that they didn't really want it, that they thought they should raise
In
children.
a follow-up interview with People magazine on September 18th, she softened her tone. "Look, I said what I said, but I also recognize that we were both under enormous pressure. That film was make or break for both of us. Maybe if we had met under different circumstances, things would have been different." When asked if she would ever apologize to Deborah, Shirley said, "Apologize for what? For telling the truth? No, but I don't wish her any ill will." The final word came in late September 2025. A documentary crew approached both women about participating in a film about the making of Terms of Endearment. Shirley agreed. Deborah declined. The documentary, set to air in 2026, promises to include never-before-seen behind-the-scenes footage from the film. Whether it will include footage of the infamous farting incident remains to be seen. But one thing is clear. Even after 42 years, the feud between Shirley MacLaine and Deborah Winger is still one of Hollywood's most bitter and unforgettable rivalries. In November 2025, Shirley turned 91. She lives quietly in her New Mexico ranch, surrounded by books on spirituality and memories of a long, complicated career. She has one Oscar, dozens of film credits, and a legacy as one of Hollywood's most unique personalities. But when people think of her now, many think of Terms of Endearment. And when they think of Terms of Endearment, they think of the feud.
I didn't think I was taking a job for no pay.
You thought they'd pay you?
Oh, yeah. Well, you always think that.
Shirley knows this. In her most recent interview on October 15th, 2025, she was asked how she wants to be remembered. "As someone who told the truth," she said, "even when it wasn't easy, even when it made people uncomfortable. I lived my life on my own terms. And yes, that included refusing to tolerate disrespect from anyone, no matter how young or talented they were." Deborah Winger, for her part, has remained silent. She continues to act occasionally and lives in New York with her family. She has never publicly confirmed or denied the farting incident. But in Hollywood, silence sometimes speaks louder than words. The feud between Shirley MacLaine and Deborah Winger stands as a reminder that even the most beautiful films can be born from ugly circumstances. And sometimes the drama behind the camera is more compelling than anything that ends up on screen.